Hello everybody, my name is Joe Shelton and I'm a singer, songwriter, music producer, and recording artist from Indianapolis, Indiana. Over the last year, I've stepped out and performed music on over 200 stages. Along the way though, I met a lot of great people that I didn't expect to. They were inspiring artists and songwriters and musicians, and I want to share all of that inspiration with you. So that's what this show is about. Moonshine equals love, shine in love on the music. Moonshine and music starts now. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 6 of Moonshine and Music. It's very good to have you here today. We've got a great show on tap. I want to talk about this next guy with a little bit of reverence. He's kind of a rock star in these parts. A country star, I guess. Frank Dean is today's guest, and Frank owns a guitar shop down in Franklin, Indiana, but he's been all over the place. He's lived in Nashville. He's played with a lot of actual superstars, and he's friends with a lot of them, and he talks about them during the interview today. And there's a photo gallery in his shop of all of these incredible photos, of him with different stars. We'll put some of those up for you to take a look at during the interview. But I'm telling you right now, you're going to not want to miss today's interview and performance. Frank is one of a kind, and he's a really cool cat. So let's just stop goofing around and get right to it. Here's our interview today with Frank Dean. Welcome to Moonshine and Music, Frank Dean.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's great to have you here. We at the start of the show, generally, we try to get to know people and where they came from and what their roots are, so we can get to know the artists better. So if you want to tell us a little bit about where you grew up, that'd be a good way to start.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks again for having me.
You're welcome.
Drove down from Fort Wayne last night. Cadillac, my traveling partner, Cadillac Scott Parkhurst. And I have to give a big shout out to the Best Western Motel. It was like the cleanest, nicest hotel we've stayed in maybe forever.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, everything worked. The towels were so big and fluffy, I didn't think Scott was ever going to get them in the suitcase. But he did.
Did you just implicate Scott in a crime? That's okay. Trump can get away with it. So can you,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
might as well be. No, I'm originally from Gilman Bottom, West Virginia.
Wow, I don't think I've heard of Gilman Bottom.
Well, do you remember the opening scene to the Beverly Hillbillies where Jed's out hunting?
Yeah, and he shoots for the oil?
Yeah, that's it. That's where I'm from.
Oh, okay.
Pretty much.
So did you find a lot of oil there too when you were hunting?
No, we found a lot of coal. But no oil.
But no buffalo crude.
No buffalo crude at all. Although when we moved to Indianapolis, later I thought we were in Beverly Hills, even though we moved into the poorest white part of town you could move into, and I literally thought it was Beverly Hills or New York City or something, because compared to what we were used to, it's like, man, are you kidding? You guys get a bathroom in the house? Stuff like that. Wow, you must be working it,
So West Virginia, you guys literally had outhouses still at that point?
Oh, sure, yeah. Yep, I lived on hillsides, literally in the houses up on stilts and things like that. And, my grandma's house, she didn't even have running water. There was a pump house next to the kitchen. And you went there, and that's how you got all your water for her to cook. And, the stoves were coal-fired. And, when you took a bath. You went in one room and you closed the doors and you poured hot water in a galvanized tub, and that was. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I had to move to Ravenswood to find out how poor I'd been.
I see. So, was your family miners, or?
Yeah, all of them.
And that made you want to move? Is that the?
Well, my dad had worked in the coal mines for 4 days, and on the 5th day there was a cave-in.
Oh.
And he said, "Okay." He just came home and said, "Pack it up, kids. It's getting too hard," And so we came up here.
I see. What year was that when you came to Indiana?
That was 61.
61?
Yeah.
It was a different place then, eh?
It was totally different. But, it was cool that, down there, Hank and Lefty and all that, and Bill Monroe and George Jones was king. And so, we came up here and, I got to hear rock and roll for the first time, like Dion, who's still one of my idols, and things like that, and Everly Brothers and things like that. And then, a year later, the Beatles. So, that was just a milestone, So
is that what inspired you to start playing, or?
It inspired me to start playing the guitar, but then a couple years later, and I'll never forget this. In fact, I was talking with Marty Stewart and Kenny Vaughn last night. I apologize for saying that because Paul McCartney always told me not to be a name dropper. But I remember being in 4th grade and the school bus pulling up to the school for us to get out, and we're standing by, and all of a sudden, like a rolling stone comes over the speakers of the school bus. And, it's Bob Dylan, and he's saying all these really smart, really gone over songs, and that was it. It's like, because I always loved words, and that did it for me. I started writing immediately. Just some of the most horrible songs known to man.
They weren't as good as like a Rolling Stone, just straight out of the box.
No, they were just awful for years and years and years. But I just kept thinking, well, it's better than the last one I wrote. So someday it's going to come to fruition. And so, but when I got in my 20s, it was a lot better. And my first gig was at a place called Turtle Island in Broad Ripple. Or that's my first singer-songwriter gig. I had played earlier in some school, junior high, garage bands.
Well, do you have a name for the junior high garage band? This is a Moonshine and Music tradition.
Jeez. It was probably something like, the Corvettes or something like that, or something really cheesy. The Werewolves or something like that. I can't remember. But our contract called for us to each get a pack of cigarettes and some kind of liquor. And they always ask.
It literally said some.
And some kind of liquor. And
high standards there.
And of course, the people hiring us were always teenagers too, and it was always like, "Oh, where are we going to get liquor?" And of course, we said, "That's not our problem." But somehow they always came through. So, people, I guess, young people. Boy, how old does that sound? Young people nowadays. But, it was really a different time, and it was, everything's looked at differently, and I guess some things aren't politically correct anymore. But back then, you got in a band, nobody knew anything about BMI royalties or limousines or you started playing guitar so you could watch girls dance and meet girls. That's why you joined a band. And then the folk thing hit me, and so I played at Turtle Island.
Where was Turtle Island located? I don't even know.
It's right in Broadway. It's that there's a little house that sits up there. It used to be about music for a while.
Okay, I think I know where that was.
But they had completely torn down, rebuilt. It was just a little house that was left over because Broadway was originally a little railroad town.
Right.
And I made $32, and the guy that booked it took $3.20, 10%.
What year was that?
That was something like 1970 or something like that.
Well, inflation hasn't helped the pay for musicians, has it?
No, it hasn't. And you know what? The reason I quit my job and kept doing it, it's like, well, man, I don't make this much working 8 hours at the garage, so I might as well just keep doing this, for 2 hours. So, it was, my life as a reasonable human being was pretty much over right at that moment,
So, I know that you played your way around and ended up down in Nashville. How did you get down there?
Well, I had my whole career, or so-called career, has been based on just standing around. And I always tell everybody, because everybody keeps saying, man, you got to write a book, you got to write a book. And I go, well, if I do, I'm going to call it I Was Just Standing Around, because that's really what it was. I can't put enough emphasis. If I was going to, I've got a guitar shop, and so I have all these kids coming in, and they're going, man, what can I do to really help myself, and do this for a living? And my advice is always, you got to be available. You got to be available, And this sounds really horrible, but if you got a girlfriend or a boyfriend, okay, that's one notch off. Got kids, 2 more notches off. Got a job that you think you'll need later to fall back on? Well, now you're down, you've cut it down in half. I'm the guy they're going to call that I'm going to drop everything and go. And that was how so I just, and not that it always worked out, but it made for a lot of great friendships and connections, especially down in Nashville. And, that's a tough town, and people don't realize how tough it is, But back then, you could actually knock on a publisher's door in the early 70s and say, hey, I got a couple songs. You want to hear them? And they go, yeah, come in, play me a couple songs. Well, they don't do that anymore because so many of them are in-house, and they want formulated stuff. And it's not that I'm really beating up on Nashville, that's just the truth. It really is. Where years ago, it's like, so-and-so, man, has this hit record, we got to come up with something to be even bigger. Well, now it's so-and-so has this hit record, we got to come up with something just like it. And that really is their theory. And I have a lot of friends that are studio musicians and writers and arrangers down there. And that's from their words, not mine. So it's really tough. It's a tough business.
So what year did you go down there the first?
I started going down there in the early 70s. Me and 3 other guys rented a house down there. So that way we'd always have somewhere to camp out. Because there was no money down there playing, and there still isn't. It's like there's a few places to play, but if Kenny Vaughn and Chris Scruggs are not out on the road, you're not going to get their gig. In fact, you're going to get canceled if they want that gig.
Look, you've been double booked because
right.
You walked in the back door.
Right. Or you play for nothing. And the only jobs were, the car wash, the village pantry, and all this other stuff. And I was making okay dough in Indiana, so me and these other guys that I'd known in Nashville from all parts of the country, we just rented a place together because we figured, okay, one, you can't do anything on the weekend because all the publishing houses and stuff are closed. So it needs to be the weekday, and that way we could still keep our jobs making decent money instead of having to go down there and work for minimum wage. So that's what we did. We all got a house together, and it worked pretty well. I got some minor cuts and stuff. Never really got the big stuff.
What's the biggest songwriting cut you've gotten?
The biggest songwriting cut I ever got was when that somebody else did was when years ago I'd written a song about Johnny Cash at a really low point in his career in the 80s, late 80s, when he'd been dropped from Columbia. He didn't have a record label. It was before he came back with this resurgence thing, the American Stories things that he did with the producer, what's his name? Who's the guy's name that produced it? Rick Rubin.
Rick Rubin.
Yeah, Rick Rubin.
There we go.
Yeah. So it was before that. And I mean, literally, unlike today, during that 10-year period, there were no Johnny Cash fans or nobody that was admitting it. And I thought, man, they just let him go from Columbia, and this guy paid for the decks they're sitting on, So I wrote this song, and okay, well, great, whatever. And then when Cash died, I'm at my guitar shop one day, and this guy walks in and says, yeah, are you Frank? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, I drove down here from Nashville. He goes, because there wasn't a YouTube then or anything, And he goes, I heard you got a really good tribute song to Johnny Cash. And I said, well, I don't know. I've got one. He goes, well, my name is Gene Bush, and I'm managing the Tennessee Three, Cash's old band. He says, they've been looking for a tribute song to do. And we've seen hundreds of them, and they're all awful. And I said, oh, and he goes, so do you have a copy of this song? And I said, yeah. And he goes, could I have it? Well, you know how it is in bars. There's always somebody lying to you in a bar, right?
Yeah.
Or people just like lying to musicians for whatever reason. So I made him buy the CD. I mean, I literally made him buy it. And so it's on the CD, but they're $10. He's like, okay. And I thought, well, I'll never hear from that bastard again. And 2 days later, the Tennessee Three call me. And they go, yeah, this is Bob Wooten, and we heard the song, we really love it, and if it's okay with you, we're going to the studio tomorrow to cut it. And I said, great. And then about a week later, they said, hey, man, the song worked for us. It's getting all this airplay, and we've got offers now to play Europe and have one last chance at making some dough before we retire. And so people go, man, how did that Cash tune do for you? And I go, well, the Tennessee Three got to tour one more time, and I got to buy a Harley. So, so it worked out pretty good.
There's that. That's pretty decent.
So yeah, and that was, and Cash had always been such a hero of mine. That was, it was really rewarding.
Yeah. So you met Johnny?
Yeah, several times. Yeah.
Because I know I was in your shop not long ago, and there are a lot of great pictures up, and I'll put some of them in the show. But I was impressed with the just all of the people that that have been on the wall in your shop.
I was just standing around, Joe.
You're standing around getting photos taken with famous people. It's kind of cool.
Now, I probably get asked more about that photo than any photo in the store, because everybody was going, what's Johnny like? Because, you know, there was that image of John. John was really funny. That's what he really was. He was really funny. He had a great sense of humor. He obviously had a serious side, but it's almost like he reversed what everybody else did. You know, everybody else is real kind of stoic in their life, but they're real happy when they get on camera. John was always really serious about music stuff and what he recorded. And off camera, he was kind of a cut-up, you know, and he was always saying funny stuff, you know. And
well, you know, anybody who would write The Boy Named Sue does have a sense of humor.
yeah, well, I think Shel Silverstein wrote that, but John did write some great songs that were very funny. Yeah,
that song's just so funny, and every time that you hear him sing it, you laugh. You know, I mean, at least I do.
John liked stirring things up. You know, he was one of those guys.
Well, definitely. I mean, the Folsom Prison Blues has stirred things up. And
right, but
the San Quentin song.
When he had his TV show, he had just cut Chris's song "Sunday Morning Coming Down," and he was going to perform it that night, and I got this straight from Chris, so it's not some wives' tale or something. ABC, I think it was ABC that had the show, had come to him and they said, look, you can't say wishing I was stoned. Because nobody had ever said that on TV before. And he said, why not? And they go, well, we don't want using drugs to be around the show. And he said, well, am I supposed to sing? And they said, well, can't you sing wishing I wasn't so alone or something like that? And he goes, that doesn't meet her. And they said, well, we'll come up with something. And they did come up with something. And if you go on YouTube and you look that up, Sunday Morning Coming Down, Cash, on that show, doing Sunday Morning Coming Down, when he gets to that line where he goes, where it says, Sunday morning sidewalk, wishing the Lord, you know, he looks up in the balcony right before and he winks at Christopherson and sings, wishing the Lord that I was stoned. I just did it anyway, you know. And I always thought, what a great, you know, how great is that, you know.
They didn't have any delay.
No.
So, you know, in your musical career, one of the bigger highlights, I think, is Sindicato.
Yeah.
And
16 years.
How did you all go? I mean, we had John Martin on not long ago, and he talked about the origins of the band as well. You know, from your perspective, what was the impetus for firing up a group like that?
Well, you know, first of all, we get all this credit for, oh, you guys really kicked the Americana thing in gear. You guys were the first. You were the ones that, you know, that did it. From people I respect even. And it's not that I don't appreciate that, but we didn't even know what Americana meant then. You know, what it started was I had just finished a rock and roll album, and Gary Wasson and I had been playing with some folks playing rock, and I thought, you know what? It was my parents' anniversary, and them being from the rural West Virginia, I put together like 3 songs that sounded like the songs they grew up on back in the hills. And Gary and I recorded them for them, you know, for their anniversary. And what we found out in the middle of that recording was, man, you know, we should do an album of this stuff because nobody's doing this. I mean, everybody was doing the big hair rock, you know, much so, and not even playing an acoustic guitar. So we made the first Sindicato album, Appalachian Pipeline, and as people started booking it and everything, we thought, well, this will be a couple months notoriety or something, and then it got Folk Album of the Year by the Star News, and then we decided to go, well, I'm one of those people, I really do believe in art. I've never once written a song or produced a record, Scott will tell you, with the idea of it being popular, which shows also how stupid I am. But it's always been about the art for me, and when we decided to do something different, like when the Black Album came around, we added Carlos Sasso on drums and John Martin, and put some electric guitars on it, and thought, okay, well now they'll all hate this because it's not acoustic folk. Nouveau and the Star News both gave it Album of the Year, and we got Band of the Year that year. And I kind of got tired of all that, and I said, well, we've had enough of that, so let's do something different. So we decided we'd do a bluegrass record, just completely do a complete left turn out an outfield, and then it got Album of the Year. So it was like, okay. We played from the east all the way to Portland, Oregon. We did a 3-year stretch where we were opening and being support act for maybe every major country or roots act in America. We were constantly out there. We had one July that we did 26 dates in 30 days, and the June before we'd done 24 in 30 days. It was constant moving, when something's done, it's done. We do one show a gig, or one show a year now, at the Jazz Club. We just had one a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I was out of town and I couldn't go, and I was sad.
And people always go, man, why did you guys have to break up? And I always tell them, look, we were together twice as long as the Beatles. Get over it.
They broke up.
Yeah. So, yeah. You get over it. You got all the records. Go home and play them. Come see us once a year. We'll play them for you. So that's the Sindicato thing. I still like it.
There's no hip-hop album coming?
No. I wouldn't know where to start. John might, but I think he's probably the only one enlightened enough out of the four of us. He's probably the only one of us that's ever heard a hip-hop album. Well, that's not true. I like Eminem, or I did, but I haven't heard from him for years. But
do you want to play some music today?
Sure.
We'd love to have you play some songs for us. Alrighty, thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming up.
It's great
Anytime.
to have you.
Next time on Moonshine and Music, John Gilmore takes the stage. If you're looking for folky roots music, it's going to sound something like this.
Well, you ain't real sharp, set the knife to the spoon. You might as well throw rocks at the man in the moon. You're just a-wasting your time. Hell, that's all you're doing. And you can beat a dead horse, but it still won't run. There's been too much said and too much done between the two of us. They can't be undone.
Song is about being a kid and traveling back and forth between West Virginia and Indiana, and sleeping in the back dashboard back when you could do that without getting a ticket. And thanks to my buddy John Gilmore for the loan of the guitar. I recorded the song originally on a guitar just like this, so it's like a homecoming or something. There are days I look outside my window and I dream about my Appalachian home.
Sometimes I think about my scattered kinfolk. I wonder where my loved ones have all gone. There are times I only stare in silence, thinking back what I do different now, and all of the things I've walked away from. Sometimes it's all I think about. But at night I hear Hank Williams' freight train, and I understand about those kind of blues. I miss the music coming out the dashboard at a filling station sometime after 2. There are nights I don't remember playing. I can't feel the strings on my guitar. The drunks don't hear a single word I'm saying, just background noise, some old smoke-filled bar. But at night I hear Hank Williams' freight train, and I understand about those kind of blues. I miss the music coming out the dashboard at a filling station sometime after 2. At a filling station sometime after 2. Thank you. I guess since we talked about the Tennessee 3 recording the Cash song, I should probably do that. And it's real easy. I don't have to do the Nashville thing of spending 10 minutes talking about a 2-minute song. Heard you sing Big River, and it chilled me to the bone. I heard you moan, hey porter, and leave your guns at home. 5 feet high and rising, come on, it's picking time. You walk tall each time you walk the line. Now Luther plays the boogie from the home of the blues. I still miss someone, but I will rock and roll with you. Give my love to Rosie while I'm busy doing time. You walk tall each time you walk the line. Your daddy's singing bass and picking on a flat top box, blistered from the cocaine blues and getting rhythm high. If I can't hear the wanted man, I'll cry, cry, cry. You walk tall each time you walk the line. Now many years have passed since I first heard you through the tubes, but nothing since has got to me like hearing Folsom Blues. I thank you for the backbeat and the guitar keeping time. You walk tall each time you walk the line. You walk tall each time you walk the line. This is the most depressing song I've ever written in my life. Which makes it great for a Sunday morning. I was extremely blessed that even, and I even hate that term, but I was extremely fortunate that I grew up in the South in a very racist part of the country, yet had a mother who was a person who was adamant about how abhorrent that all was. And here's a song about that. Gaines was angry, stuck in changing times. Sat up in the barber chair and boldly spoke his mind. Was I watch the TV damn near every night? There's things that's going on around here that we all know ain't right. Who'd have thought 5 years ago, come 1962, them darkies in the bottom would be taken up with Jews. They're instigating trouble, boys, right here in our hometown. We've got to show these eastern folks we don't need them around. They're meeting in that rundown church, preaching about their rights. Any interested man can watch it burn tonight. I've got 4 cans of gasoline, I'll take it to the ground. Morning comes and voting boys ain't nowhere to be found. Nighttime falls and Virgil throws a shotgun in the truck, bows his head and says a prayer for victory and luck. He pulled a 5 and 10 cent comb through greasy coal black hair. He had business in the bottom, but he had no business there. There inside the choir raised and sang the Savior's name. Moments later, God's own house was covered up in flames. Virgil stood and watched the flock go running for their lives, never giving one good damn if anyone survived. Virgil heard the windows burst, he smelled the poplar pews, held his head up proudly as the roof came falling through. But one thing Virgil didn't see, at least not in good time, the fiery rooftop cross that now lays solid on his spine. Now a dozen decent, desperate men cleared Virgil of his name. The chief of police shook his hands as he removed the chains. But Virgil Gaines is crazy, demons haunt his mind, 'cause he's trapped there in that wheelchair while he waits on time. Thank you. Thanks, John, for the guitar.
Yeah. Frank Dean, told you it was going to be great. Anyway, Frank Dean, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for coming into Moonshine and Music. And next week, make sure you tune in on Sunday. We're going to have John Gilmore here with the folk roots kind of Americana, trilogy. He mixes it up that way. It's really good, and he will be here next week. And we really appreciate you joining us each week for Moonshine and Music. Moonshine and Music is a presentation of Notlehs Entertainment. Copyright 2018, all rights reserved. Our producer for today's show was Joe Shelton. Our cameraman, grip, and stunt double was Brent Lee Smith. And also helping out on cameras, setup, and all sorts of other things, Bailey Shelton. Thank you for joining us, and join us next week on Sunday for Moonshine and Music.